Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm here with Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, and this is our update for Thursday, January 28th on the Westchester coronavirus picture. We're providing information twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays generally, unless there's a holiday or special activity. And if there's any reason to report after today on a more timely basis, we will, but we would assume that we'll give you your next update on Monday at 2 o'clock. So this is our Thursday update at 2 o'clock. The numbers that we have on the extent of the coronavirus continues to show a high level of infection. We had 839 cases that tested positive yesterday into today. And that number is a little bit a higher number than we've seen in the last few days, where we were in the 500 and 600 range. Pandemic to date, we've had over 92,000 cases test positive. We have 80,869 cases that tested positive as of 2 weeks ago, so the net difference is 11,193 active cases. Of that 11,193, that number is very consistent with where we've been now for about 3 weeks, in the 11,000 range. We had been climbing rapidly from pretty much election day until now, gaining 10,000 active cases over that period of time. But in the last 3 weeks, we've flattened out a bit, and we hope that's a sign going forward. On any given day, you can have an uptick in the number of cases. Sometimes it depends on the volume of testing. If you have a lot greater, much higher volume of testing, you might get a somewhat higher number of positives, but it basically tracks in a certain direction. And so right now we seem to have cases flat, but flat at a very high number. And of course, what matters once someone is tested positive for COVID is how many of them become ill. Right now, the most recent hospitalization number we have is as of Tuesday, 2 days ago, where we had 569 individuals hospitalized for COVID. That's down a little bit from the day before. But there's always an oscillation in hospitalization. You have to assume you could have a range of plus 20 or minus 20 on any given day. You look for a multiple day trend, a rolling 3 days or rolling 7 days situation. Just to put it into some perspective, if we have 569 hospitalizations a week before, same day, 588 hospitalizations, so a little higher. The week before that, 554 hospitalizations, a little below what we had today. And 3 weeks ago, 491 hospitalizations. And during that 3-week period, we were coming right after New Year's and just starting that final little climb up to where we are today. But we are encouraged that we haven't broken 600, even though we've been in the high 500s for a number of days. We hope those are signs that are positive, but we're not really sure. The numbers on fatalities, are not good. We lost 11 Westchester residents last night. We have reached a total of 1,875 individuals who have passed away. And I think I've made the point more than once that we've had a very steep increase in the number of fatalities over the last couple of months, since about December 1st, late November, Thanksgiving perhaps. And the fatality number is the statistic that carries with it great emotion and a great sense of sorrow and loss that can't be regained. People who are hospitalized can recover. People who test positive can go through the incubation period, but those people that we lose them forever. And there is no way to recapture that moment, and that's really why this pandemic is so important to us. We still continue to, by the way, to have the ribbons of remembrance recognition here in our Westchester County office building, the McCallion office building, 148 Martine Avenue. And if you are in the area, you're welcome to come by and observe it. We intend, when the weather's better, to put it back out at Lenoir Preserve so it can be out in an open area where you can appreciate the remembrance of these people that we've lost, and we have lost at this point 1,875 individuals out of the numbers. Now, we're also recognizing that we have a more communicable strain that has been found in Westchester County, the UK strain, and now we're hearing that there are other strains, Brazilian, South African, and we're not really sure how many more we're going to see. At our level of government, we're not on the cutting edge of it. I watch the nightly news, you watch the nightly news, and we both learn the same thing at the same time. But the degree of communicability of the disease is not to be equated to the greater severity of the disease or the greater fatality of the disease. We have not yet been advised by medical science that the presence of these strains represents a greater level of illness or a greater degree of fatality. So we'll be hopeful that at this stage of the game, we're in the process of trying to flatten out this second curve that we've received. And hopefully with the vaccine distribution, we'll start to see the numbers of new infections go down. But it's going to take time because we're nowhere near vaccinating a large enough portion of our population. There are a number of issues that are timely. We'll try to cover them as quickly as we can. We have a situation that we started dealing with directly about a week ago, and that is that of authorizing high school sports, particularly what's considered high-risk sports, from playing. We've had certain sports identify as low-risk sports, and those have continued throughout the course of the seasons. But with high-risk sports, basketball, hockey, football, wrestling, a number of other sports, the concern is that the virus can be transmitted more easily when combatants in a contest are in much greater closeness. We've talked about it from a county recreational standpoint last summer when we discussed bicycling and golf and a couple of other activities. But now we're dealing with high school sports because the governor last Friday authorized it being able to start on February 1st if approved by the local county departments of health. Now, the county department of health is under the direction of the county executive, but in health law of New York State, county health commissioners have independent authority to make certain decisions which cannot be overridden by the county executive. So we've had some discussion about this issue. As I alluded to on Monday, we've had conversation with the relevant county executives in Section 1, which is the Lower Hudson Valley region that includes high schools that compete against Westchester high schools in each of these different sports, boys sports and girls sports. And that includes Rockland County, Dutchess County, Putnam County, and to some degree Orange County. And so those respective county executives, Ed Day of Rockland County, Mark Molinaro of Dutchess County, Mary Ellen Odell of Putnam County, and Steve Newhouse of Orange County. And we've also included, for conversation's sake, Pat Ryan, who's the county executive of Ulster County, Kingston, the next county north of Orange. We've discussed how we are going to approach this in a general way. Yesterday, the county executives issued a statement which indicated that we would urge the authorization of playing high school sports as long as each of the different sports programs followed the protocol that's been set down by the state health department. And in these things, sometimes it's very difficult to figure out who's making the decision. You should know from these updates, if you've watched any of them in the past, much less all of them, that the state of New York, the governor of the state of New York, has taken on the authority granted to him by his position, executive authority, to make decisions that are societal across the state. Things that would otherwise fall to other decision makers now all aggregate to him. And he made the decision in this case to devolve that decision down to a local level. And so that is why on this particular issue of high school sports, it becomes a localized decision. But it does not make sense to make a local decision in Westchester since we compete in a conference with other counties. So that was the reason for the collaboration between all four counties. Again, the high-risk sports that are covered under this, I mentioned a few of them offhanded, but football, wrestling, ice hockey, rugby, basketball, contact lacrosse, volleyball, martial arts, and competitive cheer and dance. And these sports involve both boys and girls as they compete in different sports. As you're well aware, there's boys basketball. There's also girls basketball, highly competitive. Competitive cheer and dance generally involves lots of high school females. Volleyball as well can be a sport that's played by both, as can martial arts. They're all subject to Title IX equality. And so therefore, all of those are the sports that fall under this guidance. The region will monitor whether there has been a more transmissible variant of COVID-19 and whether or not that represents an infection level that then sets a new standard by which we track the infection level at the various schools. So we're trying to make sure that the schools do not outpace in infection rate the communities that they're in. And so far, the schools have not been a major generator of positives. And I attribute that to the combination of factors, the special care that's gone into making sure that school buildings are as sanitized as they can be, the fact that there is hybrid and in some cases remote learning regardless, so there's not as much interaction within the various circumstances. But it's also important to understand, and I think we do, that there's always a balancing point. We made this point back in the spring when we talked about those things that we kept open versus those things that we closed. We closed fireworks, we closed Playland Amusement Park, we ended the ethnic festivals at Kensico at the same time that we were allowing beaches and pools and golf courses and bicycling to remain, because there is a need for people, even during the pandemic, to be able to exercise, to stretch their legs, to have some mental health that comes from physical exertion. And to suppress all of that over an extended period of time, as we have seen, has caused some mental health issues, which are serious. And so I think understanding that young minds are forming during these years that they're in school, high school, and below, it was important for us to look at this issue not merely from the physical health issue, but from the mental health issue as well. And so we've come down on the side of trying to operate it in a way that makes sense, has protections to it. We are going over some additional protocols with our health department, Dr. Amler, Dr. Dial Hewlett. You've met some of these people in our various COVID events, town hall events. There'll be another one tonight I'll reference in a second. And they're going to have some additional suggestions and recommendations, which we'll share with school superintendents and hopefully implement. And hopefully we'll have a safe, period of high school athletic competition, which will be helpful for all factors being involved. This is a situation where if we see that there is an outbreak, we will shut down a particular sport as well as a particular school or team that participates in it. And you've seen that happen at other levels. When Major League Baseball had their shortened season, there were examples of a couple of franchises, Miami Marlins, St. Louis Cardinals, where there was some extension of infection and that caused the cancellation of some games. You've seen it in pro football where a Sunday game got postponed for a few days to make sure that testing was done on all of the athletes. This is at the professional level where there are a lot of dollars at stake. Here at the high school level, we will do that to protect the health of the young people and playing and so forth. And we'll also make sure that there are regulations on spectators. Under normal circumstances, some of those high-energy sports attracts a lot of people to come out and watch them. And I've often spoken about, growing up in Mount Vernon, which is a very big basketball school, and what it was like to go out to a big basketball game in that high school experience. And for many, the community that I've lived in for the last 35 years, Rye High School, very committed to their football and hockey programs. So all of these things are very important, but we also have to manage the spectator experience so that we don't expand the spread of the disease. That is what is most important here. And so we are trying to take a balance by permitting this to go through, but to go through with certain protections. And I think at the end of the day, it's the wise decision. If it turns out not to be the wise decision, then we'll revisit it and we'll go forward in a different direction. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to administer this, and I have confidence in the school districts and the school athletic directors, the school medical professionals, that we all understand what's at stake here. We'll do our diligence, we'll protect the young people, give them the chance to compete, and as I say with everything, get through this. Now, it's very important to understand what the authority of the county government is, and I'm not here to give you a 3-credit course in comparative governments. It would take a lot more than one hour session. And, oftentimes when I'm introduced, sometimes people will mention the different positions I've held. The same is true with Ken, who's held different positions in public office. And it's very difficult for a person who doesn't pay attention to the structure to misunderstand who has the authority to do what. There are different positions, and look, you're busy with your career, you're busy with your family. As I said, you're not here to take a master's degree course in government. But it's important to understand who makes the decision under what circumstances, because when you want to affect the decision, when you want to lobby, when you want to see a change in something, you have to direct it to the right people. We may watch in national television, there's a debate now in the United States Senate about whether or not they should continue to have filibuster procedures in the United States Senate, long speeches that can avoid a vote, that even a minority can forestall or end a vote if they have a long filibuster. It's pretty obvious that if you go to your town councilman has no influence over the United States Senate and the filibuster rule, nor does your county executive, nor does your state legislators or your member of the House of Representatives. This is an issue decided by the United States Senate. I give you that simplistic answer, an example, because there are people who don't understand when they're frustrated who to go to, and they'll look at us in the county government because we try to communicate and we're out there, and somebody say, well, George Latimer, go to him, or go to this person, go to that person. And you have to understand that in almost all of these rules, almost all of them, they are generated at the state government level. The state government creates the structures of cities, counties, towns, villages, school districts, fire districts, library districts. It's the state government that has the superior authority over all of those governments. And Governor Cuomo was very clear, very early on in this process, that he would be the one to make the major decisions on what happens. So whether we were dealing with testing, whether we were dealing with data collection, whether we're dealing now with vaccine distribution, he has set those rules, and he has the authority and the power to change change those rules. We're going to talk in a second about the yellow zones and the orange zones being lifted from Westchester County, which is good news. And we have lobbied for that to happen. But you lobby when you don't have the authority. When you have the authority, you take action. And I think our government has never been shy. When given the authority to make a decision, we will make a decision. I have no difficulty with that. We will assess. We will listen to people, reach out. We're not going to surprise anybody with a decision, but we will decide when the authority is ours to make. There have been some misunderstandings about that. I have interacted in a couple of different communities this week where parents have said, my school district is closed and you better open it. Well, the county government doesn't have that authority. And I'm not here to frustrate you, but I'm here to tell you the truth. And unfortunately, sometimes in American government now, we fail to understand that there is objective truth. Everything is not subjective. Everything is not political. There are things that are facts. And it is a fact that when your school district is closed, it is either a decision made by the local government, the local school district, because they have decided, for whatever their reasons are, to close the school district. And when they open it, that's a decision made by the local school district. It's made by the elected school board members and the school superintendent. Now, they are all under tremendous pressure because, as you can appreciate, American minds are divided on this issue of open, close, and we have the third alternative of hybrid, where you are in classrooms sometimes, you're not in classrooms. And people have very strong feelings about whether it should or shouldn't be. Many of the times those feelings are tied into how well their children are or are not learning. It's tied into their fear or, attitude toward the potential for their children or for others to be infected if they're in an in-person situation. And these are decisions that in a free country, free Americans come to. And generally, when an issue is debatable, you get two sides of every issue. So I feel for the school superintendents that are being battered from both sides and the school board trustees that are being battered from both sides. These are not easy decisions to make. We have our share of complicated decisions to make in the county. But opening or closing a school is not within our authority. Making a determination of how many feet separation in an elementary school there should be is not within the authority of county government. Those rules have been set down by the state of New York. The state of Department of Health has put out those regulations. We review those regulations. John Nono, our county attorney, specifically looks at every executive order, analyzes it. We share our information with school superintendents and with municipal officials, so we're all on the same page. We understand what we're dealing with. And so I ask you respectfully, before you direct your advocacy, be sure you know at what level of government that decision is making. If there is a decision right now to open or close a county golf course, that is my decision, our executive team's decision to make. A decision to open or close playland fits in both categories. We have to decide if we can open it, and then at present, the governor has an order to close all amusement parks statewide. Now, if he doesn't lift that order, it really doesn't matter what we think, but since we would be the ones to operate it if it opened, we have to come to decision first and determine, can we open it or not? If we think we can and do it safely, then we become a lobbyist to the governor to encourage him to try to make the decision to open it. And when he makes that decision, he's not making it just for Westchester. He's making it for everything from Buffalo to Montauk. It's a large state. It's a complicated state. It's a pretty large county, and it's a complicated county. But each of us have our lanes, and we have to focus on each lane. So I would encourage you, particularly those of you who are deeply concerned about your child's education, understand where the authority rests. Local school boards and local school superintendents have a certain amount of authority in certain decisions. Certain decisions are out of their hands because the New York State Health Department has set down rules, and those rules apply to all school districts. And if you want to change in those rules, those have to come at the direction of the governor and the state commissioner of health. Where the state tasks the county to use its authority and its judgment, then that falls to our level of government, and we will use our judgment as we're doing in the case of high school schools. So I'm sure that these kinds of conversations are very boring. People click off. They want to know how many people died in my community, how many people are hospitalized in my community. You're just giving me that lecture you said you wouldn't, but you need to know. And at some point in time, the United States of America has to get back on a path of actual facts. instead of opinions masking as facts, and understanding the system. It's a complicated system, but it's a system that protects your ability as an individual. If you had a completely totalitarian system, then there wouldn't be any transparency. The decisions would be made, and that's it. But in this situation, there are different levels of government, different levels of authority, and each of us try to do that which we can do. And certainly we in county government are trying to make the best decisions that fall within our capacity. Now, the governor made a decision just a couple of days ago that affects Westchester County, and I would argue positively in that he lifted the yellow and the orange zone designations in Westchester County. You may remember roughly 2.5 months ago, the governor announced that he was creating a system of color-coded zones, yellow, orange, and red, from mild to intermediate to severe, restrictions on activities, and he identified 4 different categories of activities: restaurants, houses of worship, businesses in general and how they would operate, and schools. And in each of those areas, there were restrictions on the yellow zone, more severe in the orange zone, and very severe in the red zone. And he did that to focus on clusters of infection rather than a county-wide assessment of it. And over the course of establishing this system, which is still in effect, it was within his authority, and he designated 5 yellow zone areas: a portion of New Rochelle, a portion of Yonkers, a portion of Ossining, primarily the village, a portion of the city of Peekskill, and then a portion of the villages of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow that are adjacent to each other and for which you really go from one community to the next almost seamlessly. And he took a yellow zone designation for Portchester, and then he raised it to orange zone status, and orange being the next level up. Those restrictions have been difficult for those communities to work with, and we took the initiative as a county government. We don't impose the zones, but we immediately had group calls with the various 6 communities. We immediately got public service information out there to tell people what was happening. We did it in Spanish where it was appropriate because there was a high percentage of Spanish-speaking people in a couple of these areas. We made sure that we had an influx of personal protective equipment and hand sanitizer that went into those communities. We made sure that we reached out to leaders, not just in government, but in the clergy, in the not-for-profit world, in the corporate world, to try to help them work through yellow and orange zone status. And over the period of time, not necessarily the first day, but before we got to this point where they were lifted, we lobbied the state in our opinion as to what we thought made sense in these different communities. And as an example, in Portchester, for which there was great difficulty and upheaval because the restaurant community, and it's a big restaurant town, was functionally shut down by the orange zone designation, we lobbied for that to be lifted. Now, when you lobby somebody, think of how you tried to influence your parents when you grew up in their house. You tried to influence them. Maybe you whined. Maybe you promised you'd do extra chores and you tried to get on their good side. Maybe you knew your mom was a little more sympathetic, so you worked on her to try to get to dad to make a decision. What you didn't do was put an ad in the newspaper shouting out on your dad or your mom for not making the right decision about something that was in the family. You didn't, as we used to say, put it out on the street, meaning that, you tell your friends so that their dad would tell my dad something. That would be counterproductive. That's about the nicest way to put it. It would make my father more angry to find out that I tried to go around him or outside his decision authority. He was the boss in the household that I grew up in, and my mom was the assistant boss. They had their conflict, but my mom was as good a boss as my father could be when they wanted to be. So for those of you who have advocacy, yellow zone, orange zone advocacy, understand that when you are trying to influence the top leaders of this state, you have to figure out what is the effective way of reaching them. And the effective way of reaching them may not be the most public way of reaching them. So you may not know what advocacy is being done on your behalf because you expect to see advocacy that's headline, press conference, shouting out on somebody. So much of American government has turned into that. And if that were the effective way to operate, then you'd use that as a tool in your tool chest. But if that's not an effective way to get the decision changed, then what do? You don't beg and plead. You get statistics. You track information, and you provide information to show that whatever it is that you were trying to accomplish by a particular set of decisions has been satisfied. And now you can move on from those restrictions. And that was the advocacy in these communities by your state legislators, by your county legislators, by your city, town, and village officials, and by myself and our team at the county level of government. And in every one of those cases, we respected the authority of the governor and the people around the governor to be able to impose these things at their will. That's the law. However, we tried to advocate where we thought it was appropriate, and we're happy to see that these designations have been lifted. It's not because the pandemic is over. It's because these particular restrictions don't really impact the spread of the disease effectively. It falls to the same situation that we made before. When we allowed for golf, we did so because the act of playing golf did not spread the disease significantly. And the proof of the pudding is when we allowed golf and bicycling and pools and beaches, the infection rate did not soar. People predicted it, but it didn't happen because they were not contributory factors to the increase in the virus. And that is what we believe is true, and why we advocated for modification and ultimately declassification of the yellow zones and the orange zones. We're not out of the woods. But the things that we have to do will not be improved because we limit the number of people in church. They won't be improved because we limit the number of people sitting around a restaurant table. Why do I say that? Because when I have gone inside those religious institutions that are open, and there are quite a few that are not open, I see naturally 25, 35% of the people there. I see them spaced out. Nobody's sitting up close and personal with somebody else. I see in those religious services, Roman Catholic that I am, that there are protections put into place for the issuance of communion, for the way you interact. And there's hand sanitizer. So you look, you say, these protections are in place. This is not going. This function is not going to increase the spread of the virus, and therefore you should not regulate this activity. It doesn't provide the purpose that you want. And I use as an example all the time what happened on a weekend in August in Pleasantville, where the local church had 2 priests that were tested positive for COVID. We tested everybody in the parish that we could find, and it turned out we didn't have one additional case of COVID. That was good news. But what it told us is that the protections worked. And similarly, the protections in the yellow and the orange zones have worked well enough for us to feel comfortable that the releasing of those requirements will not extend the spread of the disease. Getting together in your backyard, maybe it's snowy right now and you won't do that, getting together in your basement with 8 of your close friends, nobody has a mask on, nobody's been inoculated to disease, that has a better chance of spreading the disease. And we saw the jump up from Thanksgiving, from Christmas, and from New Year's Eve. We saw that's when it jumped. Didn't jump at other times. And so it tells you that there's a cause and effect from the actions you take. And if we're going to get through this pandemic, we're going to get through it based on science and logic. And so in this case, we're very happy to see that the yellow and the orange zones have been lifted. We think that's the right decision. And if the reinfection occurs at a runaway rate, they may well be reimposed. And in the same way that we authorize high school sports, we will support closing down high school sports if it turns out that the infection runs rampant because of the decisions we made. We are not doubling down on whatever our positions are. We are assessing those positions at all times to make the best, most logical decision. In terms of vaccines that have been given out, the county government is involved in 2 of the locations where vaccines are given out. There are other locations where vaccines are disseminated. I believe we have them up on our website, westchestergov.com. You have a link where you can click on coronavirus. It's very prominent. You see that little ball with the spikes. Looks like sort of a warped, strawberry ice cream with stickers on it. That's coronavirus. You can click that on and you'll see a host of different information. And amongst that, you will see some of the other places that are disseminating vaccines. The amounts of those being vaccinated at those locations vary. Some of the major hospitals, Westchester Medical Center, Northern Westchester Hospital, some of those can deal with some pretty large quantities. Some of the local pharmacies, a few hundred over the course of a day or 2. For our purposes, 2 facilities, Westchester County Center. Yesterday, we inoculated the 15,000th person with coronavirus vaccine. And yesterday, being Wednesday, was exactly 2 weeks to the day from the first day that we opened up the facility. And we've hit, as of the end of yesterday, 15,715 Westchester residents vaccinated. at the county center. And we have at the health clinic here in downtown White Plains, about a mile away from the county center, 4,000 individuals, 4,028 to be specific, were vaccinated through the end of yesterday. So we are approaching the 20,000 mark of individuals vaccinated. I'm told, I was there yesterday with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, but I was told before I did that we are getting solid results and solid reviews from those that go to the Westchester County Center, that the system works very smoothly. People move through the system effectively. They get the vaccine. They feel that they have a good connection. They have the 15-minute period where they're being watched to see if there's any immediate reaction, and all of that process has gone pretty well. We're happy that we hit the 15,000 mark. We're very pleased that Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul could be there for that moment. We've got a long way to go. That center is open 8 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. We routinely go through about 1,100 people a day. That's every day, open 7 days a week. And if we get more vaccine commitments, we think we can raise that number up, slightly longer hours, and effectively vaccinate quite a lot of people. That location will not be enough, not by far, not by a long shot. The clinic that we have is a much smaller facility. The capacity that we're there at now is fairly close to maximum capacity. And we are looking, and we will report to the state, because it is a state decision, on where vaccines will be authorized to, locations all across the county. And I think logic would tell you that we need a few in the southern part of the county, a few in the northern part of the county. We have to make vaccination centers come as close to the individuals as is possible to make it convenient. And in that process, we're also very mindful that for every person that we vaccinate, we have to have a supply not only for other people to get their first shot, but for those original people to get their second shot. And I believe starting next week, we'll see second shots at our clinic from people who 3 or 4 weeks ago were administered the first dose. And you are not properly protected until you have both doses. And we want to make sure that we protect everybody as thoroughly as we can. If it takes 2 doses, it takes 2 doses. Both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines require that, and we're happy to be able to accomplish that. We are still very much worried about the access at the top of the funnel of the distribution system of sufficient doses. We're hearing, what you hear, that the federal government has to obtain multiple millions of doses to be able to disseminate it to the various states, and then the states disseminate it down. And we're hopeful that the new administration seems very committed to accomplishing this task, that will actually treat this disease with the severity that it needs to be treated with, and that's the only way to get past it. We're not going to get past by it with half measures and so forth. At this moment in time, just to repeat, the people that are eligible to be vaccinated are people in the categories as established by the state, 1A and 1B, and with the slight addition on the age side of it, if you're over the age of 65, you are eligible to be vaccinated. Over the age of 65. If you are in an essential worker in one of a number of different fields, and we've talked about all first responders, police, fire, EMS, corrections officers, and then some other categories, funeral directors, bus drivers, teachers in the education field, there's others. All those fields, you are eligible by your occupation to be able to administer a shot. I may have misspoken in the past. I know I have in some other venues. For those people who have comorbidities, who have certain illnesses, immunocompromised systems, I certainly understand the need and the necessity to administer vaccines to individuals who fall into that category, whatever their age is. Obviously, if they're 65 or over, they're eligible by age. If they're under 65 and they have these situations, I can understand why they should be given a shot, but we are not authorized to do that yet. New York state law has not yet authorized people on the basis of their health circumstances to be administered a shot. We hope that is a policy that changes. It will open up the door to many more people, but it will open up the door to people who are vulnerable. And we want vulnerable people to get the shot because that's the best way to avoid them winding up on my fatality list when I report that every day. And so I'm hopeful that the state will give us guidance along those lines, but so that you understand, if you're frustrated and you're nervous and you have asthma or you have some kind of a disease that you think would qualify you to get the shot and you're under the age of 65, New York state policy does not yet allow us to administer the vaccine to you. And if you tell me, well, you could get it in Florida, you're right, you can get it in Florida. 50 states, 50 different policies. If you're 68 years old in the state of Connecticut, you can't get a shot. You can get a shot in New York if you're 68 years old. This is what happens when you don't have a national policy from the beginning. Simple as that. It's just a fact. If you have a national policy, you set a national standard. What happens in Florida, California, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island, Ohio, all the same. You didn't do that. 50 separate states, 50 separate policies, and that's where we are in New York as it stands now. I'm going to ask Ken Jenkins to come on board and talk a little bit about who we're prioritizing, a little bit about the second shots information, and then, of course, I'll have more when he's done. Ken?
Thanks, George. And as County Executive Latimer just mentioned, the fact that we're in the ability to vaccinate 1B people, the state has directed how that should work. New York State guidance, the county has to vaccinate priority 1B people, so police officers, firefighters, child welfare, homeless shelter staff, and some congregate care facilities, county police, probation, correction officers, labs and research staff, our staff at the Woodfield Cottage, which is a juvenile facility, and direct mental health care workers. And we just have to keep repeating it. This is the New York State guidance on how to distribute the vaccine. There is no options for working around that. As county executive travels around the county and goes from place to place, can't ask him, can't call any of us to try to change that. That is the advocacy that needs to be directly appropriated and pointed to the state and specifically to the health department. And many people are advocating for those different folks. As county executive just mentioned, specifically those folks with immunocompromised systems and those folks that have special needs, and that continues on. But the reality is, since there's a national issue, there is no national direction, as the county executive mentioned. That has caused the challenge of the number of vaccine shots that are just available. There are many more shots that need to be available, and that's why the prioritizations are important. And the county is following that directions at the county health facility. The county health of the county center is a different scenario, and that's with the state appointment sites, and those are working exactly the way the state has laid it out. And as county executive said, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul being down yesterday, and every report has been outstanding for the partnership between Westchester Medical Center, who's actually administering the shots, the county health department, the parks department from the county and New York State, working as a well-oiled machine, and everyone has been extremely pleased about that. I'm happy to announce that the folks, it's based on the state's definition for the second shots. There were many people that were concerned because of the modification in the state vaccination process that took specific vaccinations from locations based on different challenges that were brought about. Everyone that has those second shots are going to get those shots. So the county has committed, the county executive has ensured that working with the state, that those reserves are going to be there, so everyone who got their first shot will get their second shot. The state has not changed that guidance. I know that there's many people, many municipal officials that have suggested that they would like to change that particular approach to use their reserves for second shots because, a 50% coverage is better than none. But Dr. Fauci, as County Executive Latimer mentioned earlier in this press conference, that Dr. Fauci has said that you need both of those shots to get the maximum protection, and the concern that there is right now from the South African variant of the COVID-19 virus has caused that concern to be heightened. So everyone should make sure that they get their second shots, and the county facilities that are providing the shots have those reserves, and they will make those appointments for those folks that need second shots. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. And let me just reinforce what Ken said, that we are committed to making sure that the second shots are available for everybody who gets the first shot. You may hear different things in different places. Naturally, everybody is concerned about how accurate decisions are going to be made, but we are committed to making sure if you have the first shot, you will get the second shot. And that really is the only way to assure that you're safe. If for any reason we fail to deliver second shots consistently, then we're really not protecting our population. And so we want to make sure we do the right thing. We have highlighted already, a number of the different websites and pages. We'll just mention it again as it shows up on the screen. If you need to determine your eligibility, find a vaccine location. There is a website all through the state, amieligible.com. COVID-19 vaccine.healthnewyork.gov. If you want to look at the form that you use to go online, you can complete it at forms.ny.gov/. It's on the screen. You can see all of that for you. And there is a hotline number, 1-833-697-4829, that would help you in that regard. And then we'll also mention that other questions can be dealt with in COVID-19 vaccine.health.ny.gov. There's a / what you need know. And all of those services are available for you. Those are all state-structured websites or connectives. You will find this information on the county website, but we don't want you to think that you go on the county website to solve your problem. It's really at the county website as information to direct you to the state site, and that's the important thing, that you go to the state site. Now, we've been doing a series of public sessions separate from these updates on the COVID issue. We've had a couple of town hall meetings on COVID, and we're going to have another one this evening from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And in it, we're going to have Dr. Charlita Amla, who is our county health commissioner, with us again. She's been a regular behind the camera here, in front of the camera, over the course of this pandemic. She's done an incredible job, and her the skills that she has developed over her career as a medical professional have been called into requirement so many times that it's quite unbelievable. We're also going to be joined by 3 elected officials, as we had the last time. We had the mayor of New Rochelle, Noam Bramson. We had mayor of Yonkers, Mike Spano, the mayor of Mount Vernon, Sean Patterson Howard. The last time we met, today, we will have with us Tom Roach, the mayor of the city of White Plains, Andre Rainey, the mayor of the city of Peekskill, and Matt Slater, who's the supervisor for the town of Yorktown. And they will be with us here. We're going to talk a little bit with each of them about what's happening in their towns. As you know from these updates, back in the spring, we brought in all the different village mayors and town supervisors. Westchester as an entity exists, but the component pieces are also very important. And, you know, what's happening in Peekskill may not be exactly what's happening in Pelham. And so it's important for you to hear a little bit about what each of those different chief executives are working on and doing, and in concert with the county and on their own. And I think it's important. It's impossible in a session like that to answer all questions. You'll put questions in the chat box. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, will cluster some of them through and try to ask as many as we can during the 1 hour. If you have a specific need, I personally need a shot, this is my personal story, the best thing for you to do is to go on our email and send us an email at communications@westchester.com, and you can explain the specifics of your need, and then we can have somebody call you back and deal with it. We don't want to have that as the main event of a call-in program where the audience will have generic questions that affect everybody, not just that individual particular need. But we're happy to try to get an answer for you if we can. And we know that, you know, the lines get clogged up on the hotlines, and we know that sometimes it's tough to navigate through the website. So communications@westchestergov.com. You have a question, we will try to address it as best as possible. There's another issue we talk about, and we almost always tag it on at the end of this whole discussion, which is those individuals that have legitimate concerns all the way up to complete fear of taking the vaccine. We take the attitude that we trust the science, and we believe that the vaccines are what they are told we are. They are effective, they have no unique side effects, and that they are a necessary tool to get out of the pandemic. And if we don't vaccinate ourselves, and as a society we don't vaccinate ourselves, we will not get through this effectively. Now, having said that, there are people that don't believe that. And I'm not judgmental, at least at the outset, as to where those folks come from. They may come from a lot of different places in their minds, and they're free. They have a right to their own belief system, and we're not going to insult them by lecturing them or mandating them or any of those kinds of things. But I think it's important to know that our outreach attempts to be educational, and it attempts to be persuasive in an appropriate way to try to give you the reasons to overcome your fears if you have fears. And as you say, well, how do I know this thing is proper? Has it been tested? Then you need to hear a medical professional talk about the rigor that went into it. And it's beyond my knowledge of science and math. It may well be beyond your knowledge of science and medicine. I meant to say medicine, science and medicine. But you have to listen. You have to determine and try to evaluate, even outside of your own area of experience, does this make sense to me? Does the person talking to me have credibility in my eyes? In some cases, people who are reticent to take the vaccine come from a demographic point of view. They're concerned that people who fall in the ethnic category that they're in have been treated badly in the past, and this is another game that's being treated. You know, when I go to the county center, I look at the cross-section of humanity that's getting the vaccines. I don't see it being targeted to anybody. I mean, it's obviously being targeted to people who are elderly right now because they need it and are more vulnerable. But the long story is that we're going to try to provide outreach from voices that matter to you in the community. One of those voices that we're going to share a video with now is Pastor Troy DeCohen, Vernon Heights Congregational Church, one of the prominent religious institutions in the city of Mount Vernon. He happens to be head of the United Black Clergy, and so Reverend DeCohen is one of many voices that are important within the community. So let's take a look at what he has to say on this video.
My name is the Reverend Troy P. DeCohen, and I'm the senior pastor of the Mount Vernon Heights Congregational Church. In the African American community, many of us have distrusted vaccines, experimental drugs within our community. But I'm going to take the COVID-19 vaccine shot. And I'm going to do it because of the love I have for the people, the love I have for my community, the love I have for my family. The vaccine is safe. The vaccine is fair and equitable. The vaccine has a 94 to 95% efficacy. In fact, it is more effective than our flu vaccination that we all take. COVID-19 has hit the black community the hardest. I know of families that have been wiped out, men and women who have died alone in the hospital bed because their families could not even go in order to say goodbye. Heartbroken. This has to stop. And in order for this to stop, it takes all of us to participate. It takes all of us to take the COVID-19 vaccine shot.
Thank you very much, Reverend DeCohen. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and we think very directly and hopefully in a way that will reach the people that he is trying to reach. I'm going to touch on two other points before we go to questions, and we'll see what questions we have from the press. The first one is that Westchester County has been involved in a lawsuit that dates back over a decade on affordable housing. It's really more about discrimination and housing steering than it is about pure making housing available, although the substantive issue is housing. It could apply in a host of other areas. This was a lawsuit that was filed in the late 2000s, or the aughts, as that decade has been known as. There was a settlement that occurred and had to be signed by my predecessor, Andy Spano, in 2009. It was much the source of not just controversy, but political controversy between individuals. When Andy lost his reelection to Rob Astorino became the county executive. He was committed to fighting, pushing back against the lawsuit. The lawsuit, or the agreement, was ultimately enforced on Westchester County, and a monitor system was established by the federal judiciary to make sure that Westchester was honoring the provisions of the settlement of that housing lawsuit. And there's reason to believe that for other reasons that Westchester County was not particularly willing to do this. They were doing it unwillingly, or not doing it enthusiastically, to be sure. So we took office in January of 2018, and I think I was pretty clear during the campaign. I've been pretty clear throughout my whole governmental life, and including things I did before I was in elective office, that I believe that that local government has a role in helping to incentivize affordable housing for people that do not have market rate realities. We need to have a diverse population in these communities. We need to have people that perform all different kinds of services within the society, and not all services are compensated equally. So if you are fortunate enough to have the skill set to be extremely successful and have garnered great wealth in your life, I'm happy for you that you've done that, and you can afford, the highest quality homes anywhere in Westchester County. But for those who do necessary jobs but don't get compensated to that level, there needs to be affordable housing in this county. So that is my belief. That is my administration's belief. Ken has advocated this during his elective career and his prior career. And so we came in with housing compliance on our agenda, and we were committed to try to satisfy to the court that we were sincere about advancing affordable housing. It has been a long journey. The monitor's findings, quarterly, and the reports and the statistical reports we had to show. We had to prove a lot of different things. We had to prove that we were committed to affordable housing directly, and I think we have shown our interest and willingness to do that by the money we've allocated from our county budgets, that we did a detailed housing assessment need, which we weren't required to do, but we thought it was a necessary philosophical underpinning in order to do affordable housing. You ought to know what the need is if you're going to assert that you have to go forward to do this, and we accomplished that. We had the court indicate that we needed to be proactive in trying to advance model ordinances, because it is the local governments that establish zoning authority, and oftentimes the zoning will restrict or allow for certain kinds of development. And with all of those things, we've tried, I think, to do our best to satisfy the issues of the housing settlement in the court, and basically to put that behind us. We view affordable housing not as a matter of satisfying a court decision, but rather because it is a necessary and good thing for the future of this county. You can grow this county only when you have a diverse base of people, and you can't operate with the very wealthy and then the very poor, and nothing in between. And so with that, the monitor submitted a report within the last week to Judge Denise Cole. She will review it. The litigants on the original case will be heard. I have no doubt that there will be controversial comments. Perhaps the litigants will never be fully satisfied or ever satisfied. That is their prerogative. It's up to the judge to determine if Westchester is in compliance. We believe we are. We believe that we have shown intelligent, responsible leadership in the very same way that we've argued for the first 45 minutes of this program, that we're trying to show responsible, intelligent leadership on the issue of COVID pandemic. That issue we did not anticipate. We knew we would face the housing implementation responsibilities when we came in, and we're trying to do our best to handle it. That report came out that week. That is a public document for anyone who wishes to see it. Communications@westchestergov.com, and Catherine Chaffee and her team will be able to get a copy of the report. For, I believe it's 60 pages, so it's light reading. Have a couple of cups of coffee, and then, of course, there's a lot of backstory to it, which you're welcome to find out about as well. My final comment today is I'm very proud to announce the promotion of Martha Lopez to serve as Director of Minority and Women-Owned Business Development for Westchester County. She is here on our executive team on the 9th floor. Martha joined us at the very outset of our tenure 3 years ago in the capacity as Director for Program and Policy in this area, Immigrant Affairs, MWBE, but now this promotion puts her as a Director of this area. And we think it's an important area because it is not only reaching out to particular constituencies that have been underrepresented, businesses that are owned by women, businesses that are owned by those who are African American and Latinx and Asian and any other ethnicity, but it is about business development. It is about trying to encourage and support businesses to exist and function and strive and thrive in this county. And we believe what happens when we do a good job of business development is we attract more business to the county, which is what everybody talks about, to grow our county going forward. That is why we took $10 million from the Coronavirus CARES Act money and used it to directly support businesses with grants to help them through this awful time. And while it wasn't the sole reason why somebody survived or not, it was helpful in that process. Separate and distinct, Martha's responsibilities now, some of which she was performing already, now become really focused on this issue, and we think we'll be able to see some significant fruit from it. We're very happy to have Martha doing this. She served in the county administration from 2001 to 2009 as the Director of Hispanic Affairs for Westchester County, and she's done other things in her career. I know she's been very active. Previously was with the New York Power Authority in an executive position, and she's very active in the community. She originally was very active in the Mamaroneck Village community, a board of director of KEEPS, which is an after-school program, and she's very active with the Hispanic Resource Center in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. And then a number of years ago, she and her husband, Dennis, whom I've known since childhood, my childhood and his childhood, we played baseball together years ago, or opposite each other years ago. Martha moved to the city of New Rochelle now well over a decade, established herself in that community, and was elected a New Rochelle city councilwoman in the 2019 election cycle. So she is in her own right an elected official and making public policy in New Rochelle by evenings and weekends, but by daytime with us, she's now going to be focused on the MWBE thing. That's so important to us, and we're very happy that she's going to be doing that. She's also going to take on managerial responsibility for the Technical Assistance Advisory Committee. And so she's going to be working more intensely, as everybody does during a pandemic, because we have all of our pandemic responsibilities. Then on top of that, we have normal responsibilities. But we want to congratulate Martha Lopez of New Rochelle for her additional responsibilities here at the county government. So with that, we've exhausted you, and we've exhausted the topics that we had to cover. And I'm almost exhausted talking. Not quite. But I want to make sure the members of the press have a chance to ask us any questions. Yeah. Catherine Chaffee.
We have a few questions. The first question is from Josh at the Journal News. He is a sports reporter there. He asks for clarification, has the Westchester County Department of Health granted their approval of allowing sports to resume in schools?
Yes, we're ready to move forward on February 1st. We do have some details to work out. I think I alluded to it in my presentation, that there may be some additional actions that we want to make sure are in place, but they're implementation issues, not approval pending issues. So we are on the same page as our colleagues elsewhere in the Hudson Valley. We're moving forward.
Okay. The next question comes from Nikita from News 12. She asks, the South African variant was just detected in South Carolina. Are there any concerns about this variant now that the county is reopening, and any messages you would want to send out to our viewers?
Well, I think, whenever we see, things that happen that are beyond our natural knowledge base, and, Nikita, I think you and I both are laymen. We don't know medical science. Someone says to me there is a Ukrainian variant. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the implications are until they're described to me. The South African and the Brazilian mutations I've been told about. We heard a little bit more about the UK one because it came sooner. So are we concerned? Yes, we want to know more about it. What does it mean? Is it a matter of communicability? Is it a matter of severity of the disease? Is it a more fatal variant? All of those are questions that we don't know. And I'm not going to speculate because people, will work on that portion which is doubtful and clone a negative attachment to it. And we don't know whether or not this is something to be feared or just to be aware of. And then there's also the practical realities. What do you do about it? If you're trying to take the proper protections, that's what you can do. I'm not going to run in the basement and hide in a closet in the basement because I hear of the potential of something else and I don't know what the impact is. So I think, Nikita, it's fair to say, as we follow through public health channels what these variants mean, this particular one, the South African variant, it will become apparent to us, and we're going to turn to Dr. Amler and our medical professionals, and of course to the state medical department, because they will issue the orders. If it is determined that for whatever reason we need to re-shut down something, we will do that. But we'll only do it once we know for sure what the impacts are. We won't do it out of fear. We'll do it on basis of facts. And we'll certainly, share with Nikita, our friends at News 12, and all the other media outlets, whatever we know when we know it, and particularly if it pivots a decision we're going to make about restricting something that would otherwise be allowed.
Okay. And the last question is from Nikita. She asks, restrictions just let up 24 hours ago. Is there any concern? And what do you recommend people in Westchester should be doing right now?
I assume you're talking about the yellow and the orange restrictions have just been lifted. I think, first of all, it's steady as she goes. I repeat, I think I've said it twice or three times here, and I've said it every single time I've been before the microphone. And you've heard it from everybody, so why should I say it again? I'll say it again. We do the basic public health protections that we're told. To be masked, I've lately heard that we should double mask, so double mask. Sanitize your hands, wash them as frequently as you can. Make sure that you socially distance in your settings. Try to be as observant as you can when you're in anything that could turn into a large setting or in a small confined area with people. Try to avoid those things and do the things that we have to do. So that's sort of the baseline of where we go from there. In terms of the yellow and the orange zones communities, here's what's basically happened. The infection rate in those communities have dropped back from the higher level that they were when the zone was imposed. They never imposed a zone on the city of Mount Vernon. They never imposed a zone on the city of White Plains. The zone that they imposed on Yonkers did not cover all of Yonkers. So right outside of that yellow zone in Yonkers, right outside of that yellow zone in New Rochelle, were other businesses that were operating with a different set of restrictions. Now we've equalized it. And so whether you were in what was a zone or outside of the zone, you're now on the same equal footing. Restaurants, same equal footing. Houses of worship, same equal footing. Small businesses, same equal footing. So I think we follow the regulations and the rules. If the infection rates have dropped somewhat to allow for the lifting of the zones, because keep in mind the governor did not lift these zones everywhere. He still has some in play in New York City and other parts of the state. So it's not like we're going away from the zones. It's that, credit Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow, credit Peekskill, credit Yonkers and New Rochelle that they, through whatever actions, consciously or by chance, have been able to lower the infection rate sufficiently to lift the zone. But it does mean we still show good judgment. We keep the masks on. If we're going to go out to eat, we make sure that we're in a setting where there's space between us and other diners. Plexiglass separators, I've seen that. I had reason to be at the Kittle House in Chappaqua. I had reason to be in Pasquale's in Portchester. And in those settings, you see extra barriers to protect you from other people. Make sure those things are in place. If we do those things and we get more people vaccinated and we keep making sure that people get the PPE they need and so forth, then that's how we get out of this. And I'm confident, just in the same way that we were able to get through the summer, we will get through this period of time as well. So thank you both, Josh from LOHUD and Nikita Ramos from News 12 for your questions. Other members of the press, if they have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Catherine will be happy to deal with that. We've had an interview today with John Bailey from the White Plains Citizen Net Reporter. John Jordan is going to be contacting us, I believe, with the Westchester Business Publications. So any members of the press that want to reach out to us, we'll be happy to be as responsive as we can as we go forward. So we've gone slightly over the 1 hour mark. It's a lot of George to listen to. I apologize. We want to try to give you as much information as we can. We hope it's helpful. We'll be back on Monday at 2 p.m. for the next COVID update, but we'll be back again at 6 o'clock tonight with Dr. Amler and the leaders of 3 other communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. We'll take your questions, answer many of them as we can. We hope that you'll continue to stay safe as we continue to get through the coronavirus outbreak. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.